They laughed at the poor father the moment he stepped into the lavish wedding reception hall. His worn suit hung awkwardly on his weathered frame, the sleeves slightly too short, exposing wrists that bore the calluses of a working man. The expensive champagne glasses clinked in manicured hands as whispers rippled through the crowd of wedding guests. The father of the bride stood out like a stain on silk among the designer dresses and tailored tuxedos. A woman in pearls leaned toward her companion, failing to hide her smirk behind a perfectly manicured hand. "Did he rent that suit from a thrift store?" she whispered, not nearly quietly enough. The laughter spread like fire through dry grass. The widowed father's cheeks flushed red as he clutched the small gift bag in his trembling hands. He had spent 3 months saving for what was inside. His shoulders hunched forward slightly, as if carrying an invisible weight, while his eyes darted around the room, searching for a friendly face among the sea of judgment. The wedding planner, clipboard in hand, approached him with thinly veiled disdain and pointed him to the farthest table in the corner, away from the important guests, away from his own daughter. Would you have stood up for him, or joined the crowd looking away? Tell us in the comments. But no one in that room was ready for what happened next. No one knew the sacrifice this man had made, or the promise he had kept through 15 years of loneliness and struggle. No one knew the story behind the worn suit and calloused hands. No one, not even his daughter. James Wilson had never belonged in this world of luxury and pretension. As a carpenter with a small workshop behind his modest home, he had always lived simply. His daughter Elizabeth had grown up in that humble home until she was 12. Then, everything changed. The cancer took his wife Sarah in just 7 months, leaving him alone to raise their daughter. But how could a widowed carpenter provide the life his talented, beautiful daughter deserved? And if stories of fathers who refuse to give up move you, subscribe now. More powerful stories every week. The day after the funeral, with his world still crumbling around him, James had made the most difficult decision of his life. Sarah's sister Patricia and her husband Robert lived in the wealthy part of town. They had no children of their own, a sprawling mansion with empty rooms, and the connections to open doors James could never reach. When they offered to take Elizabeth, to raise her with opportunities he could never provide, the pain nearly broke him. But he loved his daughter enough to let her go. "She'll have the best schools, the best future," Patricia had said, not unkindly. "You can still see her on weekends, holidays." It's what Sarah would have wanted. Was it? James would never know. But he signed the papers, watching as his daughter moved into a world he could never truly enter. The arrangement started with good intentions, weekend visits, holiday dinners. But as Elizabeth grew, as she blossomed in her new environment, the visits became shorter, less frequent. Her accent changed, her clothes changed, and slowly the distance between them grew into a chasm James didn't know how to cross. When the wedding invitation arrived, James had stared at the thick cream paper with its gold embossing for almost an hour. Elizabeth was marrying the son of a banking executive. The Wilson name was printed in smaller font beneath her new family name, Patterson. Patricia and Robert had never formally adopted her, but somewhere along the way, Elizabeth had taken their name as her own. James had saved every extra penny for months to buy her a gift. Not something from the extravagant registry, but something he had made with his own hands, a hand-carved jewelry box, inlaid with the same pattern he had carved into her crib 15 years ago. Inside was the only thing of value he owned, Sarah's diamond pendant. He had kept it all these years, waiting for this day. Now, sitting at the back table with distant relatives who barely acknowledged him, James watched as his daughter moved through the crowd like she was born to it. Her white dress probably cost more than his car. Her smile never quite reached his corner of the room. The reception proceeded with mechanical precision. Champagne flowed. Photographers captured perfect moments. The father-daughter dance began. But it wasn't James who took Elizabeth's hand. It was Robert, in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, who spun Elizabeth across the dance floor, while James watched from the shadows, the forgotten father. "They make such a handsome family," someone nearby commented, not realizing who James was. The Pattersons have always had class. James slipped outside onto the terrace, the cool night air a relief from the suffocating atmosphere inside. He looked up at the stars, the same stars Sarah used to point out to Elizabeth on summer nights in their backyard. "I don't know if I did the right thing, Sarah," he whispered to the night sky. "I gave her a better life, but I lost her in the process." A commotion from inside drew him back to the reception. It was time for speeches. The best man, the maid of honor. Robert stood up next, speaking eloquently about watching Elizabeth grow into the beautiful woman she had become. Not once did he mention James. Not once did anyone acknowledge that another man had given Elizabeth life, had taught her to walk, had read her bedtime stories. Something shifted inside James then. A quiet resolve formed as he watched Robert bask in the applause. This wasn't about jealousy or pride. This was about truth. This was about a promise he had made to Sarah as she lay dying. "I'll make sure she remembers us, our love, our family." James moved quietly toward the front of the room, toward the microphone that sat on its stand next to the head table. The wedding planner saw him coming and moved to intercept, panic flashing across her perfectly composed face. "Sir, we don't have you on the program for speeches," she hissed, placing her body between James and the microphone. "That's my daughter," James said simply, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "The schedule is very tight. Mr. Patterson has already given the father's speech." James looked past her to Elizabeth, radiant in her wedding gown, laughing at something her new husband had whispered in her ear. "He's not her only father. Would you fight for your moment to speak, or walk away to keep the peace? Let us know in the comments." The wedding planner's grip tightened on her clipboard. "This is highly irregular. Perhaps you should have coordinated with the family beforehand." The family? As if he wasn't family at all. Something in James's expression must have changed, because the wedding planner took a small step back. In that moment, the groom's father, a surprisingly kind man named Thomas, noticed the confrontation and approached. "Is everything all right?" he asked, looking between James and the flustered planner. "This gentleman wants to make an unscheduled speech," she explained, with barely concealed horror, as if James had suggested releasing a swarm of locusts into the wedding cake. Thomas studied James's face for a moment. "You're Elizabeth's father, aren't you? Her birth father?" James nodded, surprised to be recognized. Thomas turned to the wedding planner. "Make room in the program. Every father should have a chance to speak at his daughter's wedding." The planner's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but Thomas was already guiding James toward the microphone. The room quieted as people noticed the unfamiliar figure approaching the front. Elizabeth's expression froze somewhere between shock and mortification. Robert half rose from his seat, but Patricia placed a restraining hand on his arm. James took the microphone, his calloused hands steady now. The room had gone completely silent. Hundreds of eyes stared at him, some curious, some disdainful, some simply confused. He cleared his throat. "Many of you don't know me," he began, his voice rough but clear. "My name is James Wilson. I'm Elizabeth's father." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elizabeth's cheeks flushed pink. "I'm not going to take up much of your time," James continued. "I know I'm not part of this world. I know my suit doesn't fit right, and I don't know which fork to use for the salad." Uncomfortable laughter scattered through the audience. 15 years ago, I made the hardest decision a father could make. I let my daughter go to a family that could give her everything I couldn't. The best schools, the right connections, the opportunities that a simple carpenter like me could never provide. James looked directly at Elizabeth now, speaking only to her. "Your mother died when you were 12 years old. Her name was Sarah, and you have her eyes, her laugh, her spirit. The day we lost her, I thought my world had ended, but I had you. and that meant I had to keep going. Tears glistened in Elizabeth's eyes now. The room had gone so quiet you could hear the candles flickering. I let you go because I loved you more than my own happiness. I wanted you to have everything, even if that meant I couldn't be the one to give it to you. And look at you now. Beautiful, educated, married to a good man. James's voice caught slightly. He took a breath. I'm not here to disrupt your perfect day. I'm not here to lay claim to the years others raised you. I'm just here to say that not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you, been proud of you, loved you, and to give you this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the wood polished to a warm glow. I made this for you. Inside is your mother's pendant. She wanted you to have it on your wedding day. The room held its collective breath as James stepped toward Elizabeth, holding out the small wooden box. For one terrible moment, it seemed she might not take it. Then she stood, tears streaming freely down her face now, and reached for the box. Their hands touched as she took it from him, and something passed between them. Recognition, remembrance, the echo of a bond that had never truly broken. I remember, she whispered, so quietly that only James could hear. I remember the stars, Daddy. I remember the stories. It was the first time she had called him Daddy in 15 years. Elizabeth opened the box with trembling hands. Inside lay a simple diamond pendant on a delicate silver chain. Not as large or ostentatious as the jewelry she now wore, but infinitely more precious. She lifted it out and without hesitation reached behind her neck to unclasp the designer necklace she was wearing. She handed the expensive piece to her startled maid of honor and put on her mother's pendant instead. Then Elizabeth did something no one expected. She stepped around the table and wrapped her arms around her father's neck, hugging him tightly as if trying to bridge the years they had lost. I'm sorry, she whispered against his shoulder. I'm so sorry I forgot. The room erupted in applause, not the polite, measured applause of social obligation, but the genuine, emotional response of humans witnessing raw truth. Even those who had laughed at James earlier were now discreetly wiping away tears. Robert and Patricia sat frozen, their perfect composure finally cracked. They had given Elizabeth everything money could buy, but they had never told her about the father who loved her enough to let her go. Thomas, the groom's father, stepped forward with a champagne glass in hand. I think, he said loudly, we need to make room at the head table for one more father. As James was led to the front of the room, to the place he should have been all along, whispers followed him, but they were different now. These were whispers of admiration, of respect. The man in the ill-fitting suit had shown them all what true wealth looked like. Later, as the night drew to a close and the guests began to leave, Elizabeth found a moment alone with James on the same terrace where he had spoken to the stars. "Why didn't you fight for me?" she asked, her voice small. "All these years, why did you stay away?" James looked at his daughter, illuminated by moonlight, just as her mother had been on their own wedding night. "Because your happiness mattered more than mine. Because letting you go was my way of loving you." Elizabeth fingered the diamond pendant at her throat. "Tell me about her. Tell me about Mom." And so, as the reception continued inside, James told his daughter about the woman they had both loved and lost. He told her about Sarah's laugh, her terrible singing voice, her passion for justice. He told her about the night Elizabeth was born, how Sarah had counted her tiny fingers and toes over and over in wonder. As dawn approached, Elizabeth made her father a promise. "This won't be the last time we talk. This is just the beginning." They say true wealth isn't measured in dollars or designer clothes. It's measured in love, in sacrifice, in the courage to stand up when the world wants you to stay invisible. Sometimes the richest person in the room is the one with nothing to lose but his dignity. Never judge a man by his appearance. Never assume you know someone's story. And never underestimate a father's love, which endures even when all else is lost. If this story moved you, subscribe now for more powerful stories every week. And click on the video on the screen to watch the next one with a twist so powerful you'll never forget it.